all of those emotions are an aspect of our human experience. And that's what makes living in these bodies so incredible, because they emote and they feel all of these nuanced sensations. And you can take that approach of being seen and apply that to your journey and make sure that you are seeing yourself through this process of self-development, that you are witnessing with honor and with love everything that you've gone through.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 442 with guest Eliah Prichard. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I am so glad that you are here. Have you been liking the mini-sodes? First and foremost, I want to ask you that. I appreciate it so much when you all, I wouldn't assume that all of you, that would be a lot of DMs, but I would read them all. That when you tell me something that you liked about the podcast or something you would like to see, if there's a guest that you think that I should have on, you can always either email us, support at andreaowen.com. You can send it to Your Kick-Ass Life too. I'm so used to saying that. It'll still come to us, support at andreaowen.com, or you can DM me on Instagram. I'm a little bit slow over there lately, but I do read them all. I am the one who still checks those. And do you like the mini-sodes? Do you have a question that you want me to answer on a mini-sode? Kind of like the last one that I did. This one coming up is my birthday. I am supposed to record it this morning and I still have no idea what I'm going to do, but I will come up with something. I've been stewing on some ideas, but thank you for any and all feedback that you give us. We read everything. We appreciate everything. The show is for you. And I want to make sure that we are giving you the best content that we possibly can. If you are interested in working with us, if you're interested in working with me, yours truly, you can 2 ways. You can work with me 2 different ways. Privately, andreaowen.com/apply. If for some reason I end up not being a fit for you, I have 2 amazing mentor coaches right now. I call them lead coaches, Sabrina and Liz. Sabrina might be full right now, but we will find the best fit for you. Also, my Daring Way, also known as Daring Greatly Retreat. It is the curriculum from Brené Brown's book, Daring Greatly. It's the stuff that she's probably the most famous for, learning shame, resilience. We go through vulnerability, connection, trust, so many important things that are life skills, in my opinion, and coping skills really is more specifically what they are. If you go over to andreaowen.com/retreat, that retreat is in Asheville, North Carolina in September. There are a few spots left. Don't wait to sign up because especially if you want a solo room, I think there's only like 1 or 2 left. Don't quote me on that, but you can head over there and see what's available. We do that in September, if I didn't already say that. And we're rounding the corner here with the last of our therapy guests talking about different modalities and things like that. Next, we're going into relationships. I've been recording these episodes and I'm really excited what's coming up. We're talking about all different stuff. And then we're going to do spirituality and creativity. So I'm loving this. I love organization. And instead of just kind of like whatever, willy-nilly, but I hope you're liking it too. Today we have Eliah Prichard on, and I loved this conversation with her around emotional regulation specifically. I know that you're going to love it too. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Eliah Prichard is an educator, coach, and founder of the Rebound Way, a self-development community seeking to empower people with emotion regulation and boundary setting skills. Utilizing her master's degree in couples and family therapy, Eliah works one-on-one with people who are ready to feel epic in their bodies and confident in expressing their unique identity. Eliah was raised in Oregon and attended the University of Oregon for both her undergraduate and master's degrees. She has spent the last 7 years in London and Los Angeles as a life coach and interior designer. So without further ado, here is Eliah. Eliah, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited to be here. We're going to talk boundary setting and emotion regulation.
I'm excited. I know. Let's talk about everything boundaries. Like, who doesn't like to talk about
boundaries?
No,
none of us avoid that conversation at all, ever.
No, nobody does. Well, I can assure you that probably everyone who listens to this show, at the very least, likes to learn about it. Like, how do I do it properly? What happens if this happens? What do I say in this situation? So we're going to hopefully get into as much as we can. But I would love to ask you, well, I'm really curious too, how did you get into this work? Did you set out to be a boundary setting person,
no.
or did something,
no,
was there
I think I lived most of my life
a moment?
A very dedicated people pleaser who just self-abandoned all the time in order to connect with people. But I ultimately was in psychology. I worked as a behavioral trainer supporting children in residential centers in healing post-trauma. So I did a lot of attachment therapy, a lot of kind of neural reconstruction behavioral therapy with them. And then I got my master's in couples and family therapy. And that work, that kind of collected 5-6 years of experience for me, made such a huge difference. Because in order to be a good therapist and B, support children in healing from trauma, I had to ground in my boundaries. I had to learn how to speak my truth. I had to learn how to set limits and regulate my emotions so that when the kids had these big behaviors and these sort of violent or traumatic experiences, instead of escalating with them, which is our natural inclination when people escalate around us, our nervous systems want to mirror that. Instead of doing that, in order to be effective at my job, I had to learn how to go down super Zen Buddha mode so that I was very grounded and very calm and could handle other people's big emotions, which as a people pleaser who really let other people guide my emotions for a long time, that was a big job for me to learn how to do. But it made such a huge difference and kind of propelled me into, all right, as a coach and now as an educator, what changed my life and what content can I bring to people that'll most potently change theirs? And weeding through everything, it came down to boundary setting and it came down to emotional regulation and emotional empowerment. Those two things.
I feel like that is the foundation of personal development. I always say, definitely your values are at the center of it. But I think that's values are great when you are of sound mind, when you can think clearly, when you're not in a trauma response. That's great. Let's go in that direction, which is fantastic for coaching. And, but I love the kind of trajectory that got you there. You got me curious about something. And this is a term that I know that I've heard on this podcast from a few guests, but I don't think that I've touched on it. When you say self-abandoned, what does that look like? How does that manifest as a behavior?
When we are younger, our natural inclination is to seek love and support and connection from the people in our lives, right? So that we can survive. And depending on the context in which you grew up, depending on your relationships with your parents and your kind of family setting and your family environment, you may have needed to, quote, self-abandon in order to get that connection and that support. So self-abandonment is anything from shutting down your emotions in order to make other people feel more comfortable, talking yourself out of your inherent boundaries or your truth in order to sustain a relationship or a connection. You're essentially...
So is that kind of making excuses and justifications for someone else's bad behavior?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
In order to keep the peace, right? Or setting your needs aside in order to meet the needs of others. So be the person that is giving, rather than having a balanced relationship where you're able to receive and to give and have some reciprocity there. So self-abandoning really covers everything from shutting down or ignoring or avoiding your emotions to not speaking your truth and putting yourself aside, right? So not bringing yourself into the picture in order to keep a relationship going with somebody. What do you think? How do you guys kind of conceptualize that over there?
The same. You articulated it beautifully. Thank you. And I think Well, my last book I wrote about how women in particular are socialized, and it's just our culture to raise little girls to do all of those things that you said, to put everyone else's comfort before yours, never rock the boat, make a scene, or, speak out against something, people please, until the cows come home, all of those things. And that aside, I saw so much of myself in what you were saying. And here's the kicker. I had a happy childhood. Like I was not abused. I was very lucky. I was loved. My parents were affectionate, and all of those things that you mentioned still happen.
Isn't that a trip?
And I think that that's not that uncommon. We when we talk about or hear about people who had childhood trauma, I think what comes to mind is these very obvious and egregious things that'll bring you to your knees, these stories. And there can be more subtle things that happen that still carry with us into adulthood. Because I know that was, the birth of my own pretty severe codependency. It was the birth of my love addiction, and then my alcoholism. And I kept thinking, like, where did this come from? Like,
it's such a valid question. It's such a valid question.
Nobody talked about emotions. It was shoved down. Feelings were made fun of, all of those things. So I wanted to say the personal anecdote, because I know that there's people listening who, had a variety of childhoods, and it all matters. It all matters.
And ultimately, none of us were taught how to emotionally regulate and access our own individual needs and our truths and learn how to speak boundaries. And if we did, then I think that would mitigate some of these situations where you may not have gone through something that was traumatic or abusive and caused you to need to adapt in very severe ways. But you were still never taught how to be empowered in your body and clear all those overwhelming emotions like anxiety and guilt and shame and fear and anger and depression that get in your way of speaking your truth and fully stepping into the life that you want to live, right? Like you weren't taught how to use your body as a vehicle for empowerment.
So where does someone start? Like if we're talking to a woman who's listening, she's anywhere from probably 30 to 55. And she's like, yes, Eliah, that was my life. And where do I even begin? Or maybe they've gone to talk therapy and they kind of like logically see their quote unquote issues. But when it comes to the physicality of it, where can someone start?
The best place to start always, always, always is with your emotion regulation and your body. The thing with boundary setting is it doesn't really matter if you know the scripts and you know the right words. Like if you can't emotionally attune yourself to the emotions that you want to feel, right? Compassion, connection, love, empowerment, then the words aren't going to be able to come to you anyway, right? You're going to be in a state of defensiveness when you're trying to speak your truth, when you're trying to stand up for yourself or express your needs. So the place to start always is with whatever overwhelming emotion shows up in your body most frequently. So that question in and of itself, just answering that is the very first step, no matter what self-development journey you're going on.
So I'm assuming that's typically fear, sadness, frustration, anger,
anxiety or guilt. Those are huge ones that come up frequently for people. So when you identify that, then you can start to dig into, okay, how do I respond when anxiety comes up in my body, for instance? Do I project it onto other people with blame or contempt or resentment, right? Yeah. Do I project it?
Passive aggression,
defensiveness, or do I shut it down? Do I like compartmentalize it and withdraw and isolate, right? And
say everything's fine. Don't worry about it.
Talk yourself out of it. Rationalize other people's behaviors. So you identify the emotion, you identify how you respond to it. And from there, you're going to start to build awareness, right? And that's where your value systems can start to come into place because you've started to build awareness around your behavioral patterns. And then you can start to self-soothe and self-regulate those and slow the roll a little bit, slow down that process so that you can start to disrupt it, with breath work practices or meditations or exercise or dancing. We could do a whole separate conversation just on self-soothing practices.
I'll bet.
But
I've had some guests on recently who've talked about self-soothing practices. And it's exactly the same as what you just mentioned. And I'm thinking about like, what do I do during those moments? And it's what you just mentioned. When it's in the moment, I usually, and I've told my listeners this before. I am quick to jump to anger. That is my go-to when I am scared or hurt, afraid. I immediately get angry, and then I start crying. So I let myself have the tears, because previously I wouldn't. I would shove it down and try to put on this strong armor, and then I name what's there, and only to save people. And I also, exactly what you said, I have to breathe, because or I'll hold my breath, and that just exacerbates the problem, I've realized.
Yeah. So you're compartmentalizing all these feelings. That's sort of the natural inclination. And then it explodes into anger. And then the expression of the body wants to come up in those tears. But when you're shutting that down, it just like continues the cycle, right? So it's so beautiful that you're letting it out and witnessing your body and just allowing it to go through the process it needs to go through, while you support it learning a different way of emoting and communicating.
Thank you. And my body would like laugh a little bit, because I swung the pendulum so far the other way when I realized, okay, you can't, you do anything you want, but it's not healthy to have outbursts of anger and name call and yell, which was my former marriage. And now I swung it so far the other way where I would shove it down, and I'm like, okay. And I kind of made up a story like, well, feelings, maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I'm making up that it's worse than it really is. So I wanted to say that too. It's like, okay, you can go too far in the other direction.
Absolutely.
So I'm still, after all of these years, like learning what the middle ground is, and learning how to self-manage enough so I can have a healthy conversation. It's very tricky. And I want to get into this too, because then I find myself wanting to take care of the feelings of whoever I'm having the conversation with, which is another thing to learn of like, okay, I'm not responsible for their emotions, as long as I'm showing up with kindness and clarity and all of those things. So, okay, before I do want to circle over to that, like what people can do like in the moment of these hard conversations and boundary setting. But can you tell us what is the circus ball story? I'm very curious about this.
Okay. The circus ball story is essentially when I was 7 or 8 years old, I had this moment for the first time in my life where I realized that I was in charge of determining the emotions that I felt in my body. I had this aha, split second insight drop moment of realizing, I actually get to choose my internal experience. And what it was is I was on a stage in my elementary, and it was one of those old elementaries with like the oak stages in the gym, and I have no idea why I was
American flag over on the side.
Yeah. A couple centuries old school kind of a thing. And we were on the stage, me and a couple of friends just passing time. I have no idea what we were doing and why we were in class, but we were just passing time. And there were these like 2 foot by 2 foot, kind of diameters, hard circus balls, like you'd see an elephant kind of prancing around on in like the classic circus poster and scene setting stuff. We had some circus performers there for our PE class or whatever, but we were passing time. And as a classic middle child, I was like, oh, I bet I could just like glide across the top of that circus ball and like impress some people and do the entertaining thing, and I'm pretty confident in my abilities. So I'm just going to pop up there and like, it can't be that hard. And everyone thinks like, they're just going to think I'm great. And this is going to be awesome, So of course I climb up on the little mats and I take one step on the circus ball and I'm like, this is going great. Okay. I'm going to impress everyone.
Try to stand
because we balance on it.
Oh, I thought you were going to like belly roll over.
No.
Like, that's not that hard.
No, we had just seen in my PE class, these adult gymnasts. Like I am not a gymnast. I have never been, like, just to clarify, I have terrible balance. But we had just seen these adult gymnasts like walking along this circus ball and like having it glide effortlessly below them. So I was like, this can't be that hard. And of course I took one step on, and then the next thing I knew, like my feet were in the air above my head. I was like crashing down onto the floor. But there's this micro moment when I fell onto the floor between when I fell and when I got up that like changed everything. So in that moment, I hit my tailbone super, super hard, right? So I felt this rush of pain through my body. I don't know if you've ever bruised or hit your tailbone, but it's like
I used to play roller derby.
Yeah,
it
there
was
you go.
given.
Yeah, constantly, right? So like your legs start instantly like throbbing with severe pain. Your gut kind of starts to turn. Your whole body just sort of cringes. And I felt that rush of pain go through my body. And then a split second later, I felt this intense heat of embarrassment take over all of the pain. And I had this thought before I even like moved, just as I was processing this sort of intense experience of like, why would embarrassment take over physical pain? And I was a kid who, I wanted to hide my feelings. So even expressing physical pain around people is something that I didn't feel comfortable doing. But then the idea that embarrassment would rush in and trump actual physical damage didn't make sense to me at all. And the thought dropped in of like, well, if that's the case, then embarrassment is an illogical emotion and I'm not going to feel it anymore. And those were the words. I was like, embarrassment doesn't make sense. It's worthless to me. And so as I stood up, I like consciously decided I'm not going to feel embarrassment anymore if it doesn't make sense. That motion isn't serving me and it's not following any rules of logic. And I never did. And that was kind of the first moment in my life when I realized the emotions that we're taught to feel by our social environments, by our family, are just that. They are tied to the context in which we're taught them. And we can choose how we feel at any point in time as we are adults, as we are changing the environments and the relationships that we're in. We can choose to renegotiate our relationships to our emotions so that they serve us and they support us in speaking our truth. And we can change, the way that we make meaning out of what comes up in our body, essentially.
Yes, the meaning making. Okay, I love that story. I'm so sorry that you had to get hurt to have that epiphany. But I'm curious because I've always really disliked that alleged Eleanor Roosevelt quote of like, no one can make you and feel inferior without your consent. And I'm like, try telling that to someone who has a trauma response or who has complex PTSD. Right. Like I've always felt like there are some feelings and responses, I should say, responses to words, to certain people who trigger us, like where we really don't have any control over it. So is what you're describing kind of like a PhD in personal development, or do you teach people that just for kind of anyone?
I teach it for anyone. Absolutely. Anyone and everyone. And I believe we should start teaching this very, very early. And part of that
it probably makes a big difference.
Yeah. And part of that is just allowing parents to have education, right, on emotion regulation and boundary setting so that they can separate their challenges from their children's, right, and just educate their children to be empowered in their body. But an emotion is just like a sensation in your body. It's a physical sensation paired with a cognitive thought or a meaning making, right? So you have a nervous system response that makes you feel whatever sensation you feel in your body. And then you pair it with a thought. And that's how the emotion is created. So take anxiety, for instance. Anxiety might be the flipping of the stomach, tingling in the hands, kind of nervous, uppity energy. Well, you can take those same sensations and apply them to excitement. Right. So how we make meaning out of what's going on in our body is something that everyone can learn how to do and how to process. And they can use those feelings that feel overwhelming, like the anger or the fear or the guilt, to start indicating to them, not, oh my God, this is terrible. I've failed. Nothing's ever going to work out. I'm going to be alone forever. They could take those feelings and be like, oh, I'm feeling that sensation in my nervous system that I used to pair with guilt. And now I'm going to use it as an indicator for growth and for change. Right. So,
yeah. Okay. I gotcha. And I'm also assuming that's a process, it's not just a flip of a switch.
It's absolutely a process. Like you were talking about in your journey, when you went from exploding and allowing the anger to be you to using your brain to redirect it, right? You went from being fully embodied to being fully in your cognitive world, all up in the head. And now you're practicing embodiment paired with the kind of logical meaning making side of things. You're finding that balance between being in your body, witnessing the nervous system, right? It's all neural pathways that you've got going on. Like, so you got to witness your nervous system, appreciate that the brain does take time to change, but it does change.
But it does
It
change
changes.
100%.
And so you just have to find that balance between having compassion and curiosity for what your body's experiencing and allowing it to go through that process while sort of slowly feeding in new self-soothing practices, new experiences of communicating in ways that are safe with yourself and with other people, and just giving it the time to develop those new neural pathways, but also being in the body and allowing it to be in its process, right? Because we can't go from 0 to 100, unfortunately.
Right. Thank you. Because that's what I was kind of like interpreting it as, and I'm like, surely she can't mean that.
Yeah, come on, get with it. Just have these like deep insights.
Jeez, Andrea.
Yeah. No, I mean, sure. I cleared embarrassment when I was young at this one little moment, but then like had all the other emotions to experience. I had another sort of small aha moment.
It's probably not linear, and but it is possible. That I truly believe. 100%. Like, and I can attest that it's changed a lot. And I will mention this quickly too, because recently I recorded a podcast with a dear friend of mine where I was talking about, do you follow Brene Brown's work at all? Okay. So she has a book out recently, and in the book and on her podcast, she talked about some new research that came out around the emotion of humiliation. And I have a situation that happened about 15 years ago. My husband had an affair with our neighbor and got her pregnant. It was like truly awful and profoundly humiliating. Yeah. And when I was in training around Brene's work, they kind of just, the focus was on shame. And I took it as like humiliation has the same physical manifestation. It feels the same in the body, but it's really, I made up that they were kind of saying it's really not that big of a deal. Right. And so I was like, oh, maybe my experience, maybe I'm just overreacting, feeling this way. So the long and short of it is she came out recently and on her podcast and said, I'm rethinking how we're looking at humiliation, and it can have really profound effects on people, homicidal and suicidal violence. I turned the violence onto myself after that happened. All that to say, the experience of really feeling seen in the emotion. Yes. I can't tell you how healing that was. And this was fairly recent and gave me the ability. It was immensely helpful. I say all of that because I think part of the problem for many of us, myself included, who grew up where we didn't talk about feelings, our feelings are many times we were told we were wrong for having them, especially as children and young adults. It's dehumanizing and we don't feel seen as like a 3-dimensional person. So I think when we can finally experience that, in my experience, I should say, I felt like that was really part of the puzzle for learning how to regulate. And I just want to say one more thing. One of the things I vowed to teach my children, which I have, and they're kind of like even sick of hearing it, as I've always told them since they were little, your feelings are never wrong. Whatever you feel, that is your experience. And my job as your parent is that I will never make you wrong and tell you that you shouldn't be scared, that you shouldn't be nervous, that you're overreacting to anything. But what you're responsible for is your behavior from said feelings. Absolutely. That's beautiful. What I might hold you accountable for. If you're nasty to me, if you're being mean to someone because you're upset, whatever. So I think even just that, I feel like just allows these children, hopefully my kids, to be truly seen in all of their humanity. Absolutely. Because the reality is, sure, you get to choose how you feel. But at the same time, it can be crazy making when these big emotions come up and society tells you, you shouldn't be feeling those. You're like, but you taught me how to feel these. You told me that this is an instance where I should feel embarrassment, or this is an instance where I should be humiliated. Like, you taught me how to do that. And now you're telling me that it's wrong that I feel that way. Like, what am I supposed to do from there? Right. And you really do need to slow down and acknowledge, like, all of those emotions are an aspect of our human experience. And that's what makes living in these bodies so incredible, because they emote and they feel all of these nuanced sensations. And you can take that approach of being seen and apply that to your journey and make sure that you are seeing yourself through this process of self-development, that you are witnessing with honor and with love everything that you've gone through, rather than resentment, right? Because we can project onto ourselves as well. Shame for feeling the way that we feel, resentment for feeling the way that we feel, right? We can have emotions about our emotions.
Totally. You said something really important. You said, making sure that we see ourselves was not just about, having other people that we trust see us, but actually seeing yourself as an emotional being.
Yeah.
That's important.
And just witnessing that, because everything that you've gone through can be used to support you moving forward in a way that feels really good. But you're never going to shame yourself into a better place. You're never going to shame other people into a better place. So you got to find that compassionate center. I know.
Doesn't work.
I know. It just doesn't work. Unfortunately, it doesn't work. You've got to find that compassionate center and allow your body to be in the state that it's in now and just witness it. And then slowly start to renegotiate your relationship to those sensations and those emotions, right? You mentioned working on your codependency. And of course, if you are in a habit of tying your emotions with other people's emotions, then someone else's behavior in your marriage is going to feel like it reflects directly on you. Even though from a cognitive place, you know that that person's behavior had nothing to do with your ability to be a respected, loved person in the world who's valued.
A codependent person can hear that all day long, but it won't really
It's not going to sink into the body. Yeah. So you have to go through that process of really witnessing how your nervous system and how your body is reacting and going, I got you. I got you. We're going to self-soothe. We're going to do some breath work. I'm going to show you tons of love. And I'm going to slowly start to introduce these new tools and these new ways to interact with my center of empowerment and my voice and who I'm wanting to be in this moment.
I feel more calm already. I want to tell everybody too, I had Kathleen Booker on my show a couple of years ago, probably. I'll put that link in the show notes. And she talks specifically about breath work and even does a breath work exercise on the show. So I'll pop that in the show notes. I'm interrupting this conversation to bring you a few words from some of our sponsors. Okay, I've been talking to you about Circle DNA the last few weeks and how I took the test and sent it in. It was super easy to take. The results are back. And Circle DNA Premium is the world's most comprehensive DNA test. 500 reports across 20 categories. It's so much information. It's so interesting. And I want to just tell you about a few of them. The ones that I was most interested in were the drug responses, which I won't get into it, but I'm sure you've heard of it, where you can tell which ones you should take as directed with caution, etc. Came back that I have excellent memory skills, which drives my husband crazy because now it's validated. Yes, I don't forget anything. And also that I am gifted. I came back average on most things. Also came back average on music and dance ability. So my chances of being a solid gold dancer, probably not great, but I am gifted at information processing power. This, y'all, is probably why I talk so fast, because I'm processing information very quickly. One of the other things that was so interesting to me is, especially if I was about to have children, or even if I had adult children who might have kids themselves, is that it will test any kind of genetic mutations that you have. I came back, had no idea that I'm positive. I'm a positive carrier for non-syndromic hearing loss, which is it's just nice to know those things. Also, with Circle DNA Premium, you get 2 free one-on-one consultations with genetic counselors that help you interpret your results. And stay tuned. I will let you know how that goes. There's also, if your budget is limited, Circle DNA offers Circle DNA Vital that focuses on diet, exercise, and wellness reports if you wanted something a little bit more affordable. Your data is always 100% private and securely stored. So if you go to circledna.com and use my coupon code, Andrea Owen, you get 33% off any Circle DNA test. This is only valid for the first 33 kits sold, so make sure you don't miss out. It's circledna.com. Use coupon code Andrea Owen at checkout to get 33% off your order. This episode is brought to you by Four Sigmatic, a wellness company that is well known for its delicious mushroom coffee that is real organic fair trade coffee with lion's mane mushroom for productivity and shaga mushroom for immune support. Mushroom coffee is also easy on my gut and doesn't leave me with that awful jittery feeling or midday crash. I tend to not be able to drink coffee past 11 a.m. unless I want to be up past midnight, but I haven't had that feeling with this mushroom coffee. So it's kind of amazing in that way. All Four Sigmatic products are organic and plant-based, plus every single batch is third-party lab tested to ensure its purity and safety, so you know you're getting the highest quality coffee and mushrooms possible. You might be thinking, does this coffee taste like mushrooms? I can guarantee it tastes just like coffee.
that you have. I was worried about that too, even though I love mushrooms. It does not taste like mushrooms. It brews dark and nutty and tastes incredible. It also has over 20,000 5-star reviews. And best of all, Four Sigmatic backs their products with a 100% money back guarantee. Love every sip or get your money back. We've worked out an exclusive offer with Four Sigmatic on their best-selling mushroom coffee, but this is just for Make Some Noise listeners. Get up to 40% off on mushroom coffee bundles. To claim this deal, you must go to foursigmatic.com/Andrea Owen. This offer is only for Make Some Noise listeners and is not available on their regular website. Again, you'll save up to 40% and get free shipping. So head on over to foursigmatic.com/Andrea Owen and fuel your mornings with some delicious morning coffee. And if you ever need any of the codes or links for this or any other products, head on over to AndreaOwen.com/sponsors, and they are all right there. Easy to click on. We've been consistently using Green Chef for months and months now, and I'm so happy that they are a sponsor of the show. Green Chef saves you time by cutting down on weekly meal planning and the prepping and the grocery shopping. Who knew that that was going to take so much time and energy as an adult, but it does. Green Chef makes cooking easy, so easy, so you can spend less time stressing out about it and more time enjoying amazing home-cooked meals. The directions are ridiculously easy to follow. Jason and I tape up the recipe to the microwave or to the cabinet and cook together, and we split up the steps. It's so easy. Green Chef's expert chefs curate every recipe, so you get restaurant quality dishes at home without compromising on the taste. And these are meals that I would typically not see on a menu at a restaurant and order them. I don't take big risks at restaurants, but literally every meal that we've tried there from Green Chef, we've liked. Hands down, every single one, both Jason and I. They have fresh produce, premium proteins, organic ingredients that you can trust. Green Chef is the #1 meal kit for eating well. Go to greenchef.com/noise130 and use code noise130 to get $130 off plus free shipping. It's greenchef.com/noise130 and use code noise130 to get $130 off plus free shipping. These links and codes are always at AndreaOwen.com/sponsors. And by supporting our sponsors, you are supporting our show. So thank you.
Can you give us advice about what does someone do if they have prepared for a hard conversation with someone, and maybe it's a boundary, whether it's with a parent or a partner, or maybe even, a manager at work or a good friend, and they get emotional during the conversation? Because I found that sometimes you may not even have specific feelings so much, but even just being vulnerable in the moment makes us emotional. I've certainly been down that path before, where I kind of don't even know why I'm crying. I don't have a good reason. It's just that I'm kind of exposing myself to someone that I have an emotional connection with. So what can someone do in those moments? Like, how can they practice emotional regulation when the stakes are kind of high?
Absolutely. Well, imagine what you would do if you felt really nervous about getting up on a stage to speak. But it was really important for you to say what you were about to say and to show up for that opportunity, right? In sort of a more neutral, business-oriented experience, you would do whatever self-soothing practices you need to do before you go on stage. You would take some deep breaths. You would use whatever affirmations you find helpful in that moment. I am powerful. I am safe. I am confident. I am capable. I am excited. I'm ready for this opportunity. I'm willing to grow. Everyone wants to see me succeed. And you would start to integrate that. But ultimately, you would step on stage, despite the anxiety, despite the fear, trusting that the more that you do that, the more comfortable your body is going to get with it. And it's the same with these intimate conversations that we have. It can be very stressful and scary to start speaking your truth and to show up when your body doesn't trust that that's safe yet. And hasn't learned that that's safe yet. So what I would encourage you to do is to regulate first, do what you can to center, take some breaths. And if you're in the middle of a conversation and this is just sprung on you, this is permission to take space and come back to the conversation, right? To take space, to say, I need a few minutes to regulate my body. I need a few minutes to go on a walk and just kind of clear what's coming up for me right now. Or to
need to get some air.
Music or get some air. and then to come back to the conversation. And you might only feel 2% better, but that 2% is going to build over time.
Right.
So you get to the place where it's not so jarring to be vulnerable with other people. In fact, it's not vulnerable anymore because you know, and your body knows that it's safe to have these conversations. Maybe for the first time in your life, right? Especially if you grew up in contexts where it wasn't safe to speak your truth. If you're in the middle of a conversation, what I recommend people do, and this might as well just start as a practice with yourself, is to acknowledge what's coming up for you in your body, right?
Yes.
To say, you might see my body start to cry, or I'm feeling very activated right now. And I want you to know that I'm trying to be present with you in this conversation. And it's really important to me. So please just understand that like my body's going to be processing whatever it's going to process. I might be crying. I might feel like I'm shaking. My chest might get red and splotchy, but like that is just my body learning that it's safe. Okay. So I'm showing up with you now as my most conscious self, but my body is going to be doing whatever it's doing. Right. So just speaking that into the space takes the embarrassment out of it. It takes the shame out of it. It brings some of that empowerment back into your present moment. And then you can start to speak from there, knowing that like, you don't have to worry about what the other person is thinking because you've just defined what your body is doing to them. You've told them it's fine. It's going to be what it is. And now I'm here to have this conversation with you. Right.
I love that. I love that. I often say the same advice by prefacing the conversation and just like in coaching, we call it saying what's there.
Yes.
And
just allowing that transparency.
Right. My son is autistic and he has taught me so much about honesty.
Yeah.
And it's so something he would do. Like just
and how freeing.
Here's what's happening. Like there are no elephants in the room when he's there because he will be like,
right.
That's there.
Yeah.
Why isn't anyone talking about it? But I often give the advice too of exactly what you said. Plus, if the person that you're having the conversation with has a tendency to want to take care of you, is to tell them that they don't have to. You know, like I'm okay. I really need to get through this conversation. Please don't interrupt me, even if I do break down. I love how you said it. You use such beautiful words. I would say something like, I might lose my shit. And you're like, my body might be activated. I love that. That's so much prettier.
I might lose my shit. I know. Well, years of practice, right? Years of practice, sort of stepping out of the emotional experience and just witnessing it. Right. Being with it rather than within it allows me, like, that was what makes me feel most comfortable when I am explaining to people what my body is experiencing, or when I'm just witnessing what my body is experiencing. We're like, oh, that's just my body. Yep. Yeah. Doing its thing. And this is now my mind coming through and my voice coming through. And those two things can work together. They don't have to be in opposition, but I also don't need to control my body because I know that it will slowly develop to follow my mind and follow my intentions for my life and for my relationships if I give it the opportunity to do so. Yeah. How have you navigated that in your more recent relationships? Kind of the overwhelm.
Similar, but where my mind was going, it was definitely to what you were touching on in the beginning of our conversation about learning how to self-regulate. When we start to do that, and I don't know if it needs to go in any particular order because it kind of just, they follow each other. But when you learn to be with your own emotions and have compassion for yourself, you are so much better at being there for other people. Because I think a lot of people listening who grew up in families where, we didn't talk about feelings or emotions, and we learned how to shove them down. As I grew up and saw people, especially when I went to coach training, and emotions come up when people bring coaching topics, I was scared shitless. I was like, what do I do? How do I fix this?
Yeah.
How do we get out of this situation? What strategy do I need to implement? What words do I need to say? And it took me a while to learn how to just sit with people in their vulnerable state. And really, truly, the reason was because I couldn't even be with my own feelings.
Right.
And I actually, so our coaching training was in 5 different weekends, and I went to the first one and then didn't go back for 14 months I was
Just 'cause
having
it
a
was
baby.
so
That was part
overwhelming.
of it, but it was so overwhelming. And
Yeah.
I realized how much work I needed to do
Mhm.
on myself before I could show up for other people.
Yeah.
And then I got sober. I have 10 years of sobriety. And
Congratulations.
almost as soon as, thank you, I got sober, that was when like, oh, I need to actually like learn about emotions and like my own feelings. And because when you can't shove it into a bottle of wine, it's
right. When you have to
it's
be
in your
present
face.
with it and you can't dissociate from it, suddenly it's very real. And you realize that you are in control of all of those sensations that come up in your body. But that's such a paradox as well that comes up with people.
I felt like a raw nerve for a while. And but it gets better. It gets easier. Like I don't want people to be like freaked out as we're talking about it. It gets better and easier. And the connections that I have now with people are so much different than they used to be. I highly recommend
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
5 stars.
Absolutely. You got to reconnect. I was going to say that's the paradox with people who are in a habit of codependency or people pleasing, is that it comes with this narrative of being people first and people focused and just being like, I have so much love and compassion for other people. And that is why I prioritize them over everything else. But ultimately, because you're not connecting to yourself, you're not regulating your own emotions, you're not differentiating your identity from the identity of other people. When you do show up in those relationships, you're showing up from like a shell of who you actually are. Under the guise of supporting people, but ultimately you're not even there. You're not stepping into your life. You're not stepping into the picture. And so you can't actually be in alignment with that value of supporting other people until you're willing to do that work. But it does get easier.
It does. And like, I remember that codependent place of feeling like I was just in a panic all the time of trying to control other people's emotions, trying to control my own emotions and behaviors. And it was just exhausting. And it was, it honestly was from a place of like you said, self-abandonment. Like that's what I had learned and how it manifests many times in codependency.
Yeah. Well, it's impossible, right? You can't control other people's emotions in order to feel in control of yours, which is why
I tried.
I did too, man, for a very long time. I really, really, really tried. I really tried. And it's the same with the kind of like anxious attachment styles as well, or the avoidant attachment styles. You are attempting to control your own body and sensations and your own emotions by either avoiding or over controlling and manipulating other people to hold on to a connection that you don't have control over holding on to. All you have control over is showing up in your heart, in your grounded, centered self, and with your truth, and feeling the way that you really want to feel in your body, whether that be joy or peace or inspiration. Right. But that can be scary. And you have to just slowly step into the idea that you can create the safety that you crave by yourself within your own body and resource that yourself.
Yeah.
And then bring that to your relationships.
I've also found, I don't know if you had this epiphany too when you were doing the work. And I say this because I really want to encourage people to move forward if they're feeling kind of stuck. The sense of freedom that I felt, not having to worry about anyone else's, not having to try to control anyone else's behavior or feelings except my own. I was like, oh, this is so less stressful.
I don't have to take responsibility for your dysfunction. Oh my God. I feel amazing. The world of possibilities that opens up after that.
It's nonlinear, but I distinctly remember that feeling of freedom of just, oh God, especially if you're involved with addicts or just people who really are struggling with their decisions. That's a whole nother conversation for another time. Okay.
Well, it's major, but you have that ability to step in, right? You're like, I'm going to step into something and I don't know what it is, but I'm pretty sure there's a different experience I can be having on this earth. And it's okay not to know what it is, even if it's freaking scary. Yeah. To not know what the other options are, but there are other options, right? And there's so many people that have tools and mentorship and wisdom, and 90% of it isn't going to be relevant to you. It's not going to land, but just making that decision, I'm going to choose to step into something different and explore and allow myself to go through that process is so major.
Yeah.
So I want to honor you for that too, because it's huge to witness.
Yeah. And I hope this whole episode, everybody isn't coming across as like, yay, Andrea gets a pat on the back for all of her work.
Congratulations.
Yay. No, I'm very transparent about my journey and, when I fall backwards and what the whole thing looks like. And I know that there are people listening who see a lot of themselves in either how I used to behave, how I still behave sometimes, or how I want to behave. And I like to give people real life examples, but not always show them just the good parts, because it's messy. It's messy and it's beautiful and it's all of those things.
It is definitely messy and it can definitely be beautiful. And there's no one path. All you have to do is take one step. One new thing, one new podcast, one new book, one new mentor, one new blog post, one new documentary. And eventually, as you continue to integrate those new options into your life, you're going to find the things that work for you and things will change.
100%. And I'm sure that you're going to be the next mentor on their list. And everyone, I know I mentioned it in the intro, but I found Eliah on TikTok, and we'll drop all of your social links in the show notes, of course. Okay, this has been so informative and wonderful and helpful, I'm sure, to so many people. Is there anything, before we go, is there anything that you want to say that I may have not asked you, or just that you want to close up with so you can feel complete?
Yeah, well, first, just thank you for having me on. It's been really lovely to sit down and talk about this with you. I'm also a self-development nerd, so I can relate to your community. I'm just all up in it all the time. People ask me what fiction novels I read, and I'm like, babe, I'm all nonfiction. Give me all the self-development.
I'm the opposite.
I
follow a lot of those people online, but at the end of the night, one way that I regulate is fiction. Because I don't drink anymore. So I get lost in a thriller, and that helps me wind down. Yeah. So
maybe I'm working up to that still. I'm working up to stuff. No, I just want to encourage people to just start taking the baby steps and trust that when you start turning towards your body and learning how to negotiate your relationship to your emotions, all of those things that you are wanting for your life you'll start to have access to them, and they'll start to fall into place. Some people a lot of people in general just want to skip to the end. They want to say, I want the words for the boundaries. I want to know how to communicate with my partner. I want to know how to go get that job and talk myself into a position that inspires me. But you have to get your body ready for those new experiences in order to effectively adapt to all that change that you're calling in. So while it can feel like there's a million options and it can feel very overwhelming, the formula is very simple, right? You just create that space. You start to regulate your emotions and find empowerment in how you interact with your emotions. And the words for the boundaries will start showing up, because now you're going to have access to your truth, right? Your body's regulated. You're going to have access to your truth. You're going to have so much inherent wisdom and genius that comes through your intuition. And you're going to have the words, and you're going to know what to do from there, right? So I'm just encouraging you guys to not feel too overwhelmed by the process, not need to have all the specific answers yet, and just to start small there, even if it feels elementary. It is elementary. We should have been taught it at the beginning of our lives, but we weren't.
School, right.
So now we're going back to basics and really building that foundation for ourselves.
Oh, I love all of that so much. I love when you said renegotiate our relationship with our emotions. I love the way that was worded. So where can everyone, where do you want them to go specifically to learn more about you or consume more of your work?
Yeah. 2 places. TikTok is a great place to find me. And then if you're looking for kind of low cost, bite-sized self-development courses on emotion regulation and boundary setting, I've got those up at thereboundway.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much for those resources. And as I mentioned, all of the links will be in the show notes, everyone. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans, and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening to the show. And just a quick reminder that if your company needs a speaker or a trainer, I might be the right person for you. I speak and do keynotes on confidence and resilience for mixed audiences, as well as do trainings on the Daring Way, which is the methodology based on the research of Dr. Brené Brown. So if you think it might be a good fit, hit me up at support@AndreaOwen.com or head over to my speaking page, AndreaOwen.com/speaking.